Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Town of Barnstable's Comprehensive Financial Advisory Committee. This is our meeting of October 14th, 2025, being conducted by Zoom in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F. Any member of the public is welcome to record this meeting. It is being recorded by the town and will be available to the public afterwards. Is any member of the public recording this meeting? Hearing none, we'll go to the call to order. Jeremy, can you call the roll?
Certainly. Hector Gunther,
I'm here.
Tom Keene,
Here.
Chris King, not here, Chris Lazan,
Here.
Jim Sproul,
Present.
Frank Ward,
Here.
Lillian Wu,
Here.
and I am present.
Excellent. So we can move on to public comment. I want to note, I see we have a couple of members of the public here. I just want to make mention that we received multiple emails from the public, from Suzanne Conley, Gary and Ann Peters, and Bob Schulte. Those were all sent to me, and I distributed them to the other committee members prior to the meeting. So we appreciate that. Ms. Conley, would you like to offer public comment? You're muted at the moment.
There we go. Thank you, Chair Lozon and all members of the committee. I'll just be a moment. You all received the email that I wrote encouraging you all to keep reference to the offshore wind projects in the final draft of the fiscal year 2026 report. This is an issue I follow very closely. And I don't have too much more to add than what I said in that email. And also, you'll recall I sent some supporting documentation for the claim that this isn't going away anytime soon. But I do want to mention the first project that came to Barnstable, Vineyard Wind, and their ongoing presence in our community. I think it just that alone merits consideration by CFAC, continuing consideration, I should say. I think I heard Mr. Milne, and please correct me, Mr. Milne, if I'm wrong, but I think I heard Mr. Milne say 6 months or maybe a year ago that Vineyard Wind is the second largest taxpayer in Barnstable, I think after Cape Cod Healthcare, perhaps. That's a significant role in this community. And I think that alone merits its continued inclusion in CFAC's annual report. But that project is, first of all, it is way behind schedule. It's facing very stiff legal opposition in federal court, as well as continued opposition by the public. It's looking at a shrinking profit margin. They bid very low, considering what the prices per kilowatt hour are today. They are facing escalating costs and maybe even some difficulty finishing up construction. No matter what you heard out of the state this week, they do not run 30 turbines. They plan to put in 62, and the most, we had a record this weekend. We monitor the EMF coming off of those cables, and at the same time, we see how many turbines are running. They had 20 turbines running this weekend. That was the highest we've seen. So they're really facing some difficulty. They're at this point years behind their schedule. Should they go belly up? I hate to say it, but what if they do declare bankruptcy? They are an LLC, and it would be easy for them to walk away at some point, facing with everything they're facing. That would have quite a significant fiscal impact on the town's budget, operating budget, I believe. I'm not sure, but I don't think it's the capital budget. I think it's the operating budget. But anyway, and finally, people are just interested in hearing what's going on with these projects on a regular basis. So for those people like myself who are very interested in reading the annual report in its entirety, and believe me, more people than you might imagine do so, I would strongly recommend keeping reference to the offshore wind projects in there. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Suzanne. We appreciate it. And I see Mr. Schulte also present. Would you like to offer more comments?
It's just a quick follow-up. Good evening, CPAC members. My name is Bob Schulte, and I live in Centerville. Personally know a few of you and want to start by saying thanks to all of you for your hard work on behalf of the town. As the recent chair of the town's ad hoc zoning and regulatory committee, I appreciate how much time and effort, much of it thankless, goes into committee work. I've been watching the CPAC meetings over the past few years and wanted to compliment Chris in his current role as chair and Hector before him for the excellent work they've done and continue to do. The purpose of my comment tonight is to follow up on the email I sent to all of the committee members earlier today. If you haven't read it, I hope that you do, along with the attachments I included. As I stated in my email, I feel it is imperative that bullet point references for both zoning and housing and offshore wind issues be included in the looking ahead section of your fiscal year 2026 summary report. These are two issues for the town, and both that are likely to have a financial impact on our town, and they should not go unacknowledged in your report. I'll not reread the details of my email. However, I will point out the town council is in the midst of reviewing and discussing the recommendations by both the ad hoc zoning and the housing committees. Additionally, while wind projects may currently be on hold at the federal level, over the past few years, we have certainly learned that circumstances surrounding these projects can change from month to month, if not day to day. To understand just how important and timely the wind farm issues are, all you need to do is read our own town manager Mark L's recent statements to the town council, the Central Pacific Association, and the public. I've included those in my email along with supporting documentation, but I'll just read two comments from Mr. L's. In front of the town council on August 21st, 2025, he said, "Finally, relevant to wind projects, I just keep encouraging everybody. We have some in the ground, we have some still in planning, we have some that are proposed and out there looming, and there's more. Don't take your eye off wind, regardless of how you feel about it." And then to the Central Pacific Association at its annual meeting in August, he said, "Wind has a pause, but don't take your eyes off. Public Works, what good can come out of it if it's going to come back? Let's do it. Stay involved." I think that pretty much sums it up. These are pretty important issues, and I think they should not be ignored. So I will just close by requesting the committee to include bullet point references for both the zoning and housing issue, as well as offshore wind projects in the looking ahead section of your fiscal year 2026 summary report. Thank you for your time and for listening tonight, and good luck with the completion of your work.
Great. Thank you, Bob. We appreciate the comments.
Thank you.
And I'll just say it seems in the last couple of months we've had a lot more public engagement than in the last few years, quite frankly. So I appreciate the public's input. And we will consider that as we move towards our discussion. So we can move. I don't think there's any other members of the public here, so nope. So we can move to the approval of the meeting of 9:22 minutes. Did anyone make a motion to
I'm-
approve?
I moved.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Okay. Jeremy, can you take the roll?
Certainly. Hector Gunther,
Yes.
Tom Keene,
Approved.
Chris Lauzon,
Yes.
Jim Sproul,
Yes.
Frank Ward,
Yes.
Lillian Wu,
Yes.
and I am a yes.
Okay, great. That's done. We have multiple topics to discuss tonight, but the first one, we want to try to wrap up this financial overview report for fiscal 26. So we're going to go over Tom's final draft that he sent to us. I hope everyone had a chance to go through it. I just want to thank Tom once again for his work on this. It's a monumental effort to try to fit all that into the page constraints. So we appreciate that. I don't know, Mark, if you can pull it up on your screen or.
And while Mark's doing that, let me just add that in the version I sent you, and I think I had noted this, that I did not have FY 2023 numbers for the enterprise funds. Mark has very kindly given those to me, and so I have simply added them in. But there are no other changes to the document that Mark's going to be displaying aside from that.
Can everybody
Excellent.
see this okay?
Yeah,
Yep.
hey, Mark, can you make it a little bit bigger?
Sure.
Before we begin, I want to echo what Chris said and thank Tom for consolidating and taking all of our uh, suggestions from our last meeting and putting it together. It looks really good.
Thank you.
Mark, can you make it any bigger than that? I just have to squint to see the type. That's a little bit better, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so page 1, I think, is pretty self-explanatory. I didn't see any issues with grammar or punctuation or anything else. Any comments anyone has on page 1?
Reads well. I like the summary. The table of contents is very clear, and the figures, the budget figures are all at one glance that the residents can find out immediately what lies ahead.
Okay. Page 2.
This is a really good format.
Yeah, I think it flows very well.
Yeah,
The
it's
table,
clean. Everybody can just, you know,
yeah, the tables aren't, overbearing or anything. They're short, concise.
yeah,
Flows very well.
yeah.
I will say that, Hector, I appreciate your effort on the fire districts. I think it would be great at some point if we could actually get numbers for the fire districts.
Yeah, so the issue, Tom, as you know, is that they have different fiscal years, they have lags in their reporting. The reporting is disparate among the various districts, and
Yeah.
some of the stuff is just not on the website. As Chris
I,
Clark's,
I agree. I went through the
yeah,
websites myself and
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's an issue. Chris Clark, in fact, who is on the West Barnstable fire district or supervisory group, she apologized in the last meeting saying, our website isn't really up to date. So yeah, I think it would be, it would be good if somebody would enforce some consistency across the fire districts. The issue is, of course, as you point out in your narrative, Tom, these are all independent legal entities
Right.
with elected board members, and they have fair bit of latitude as to how they manage their operations. So
If I may, I think we could give them a format and ask them to fill it out. I would be surprised if they wouldn't comply. Maybe not for this year, but for future
Yeah.
years.
no, it's a good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah, that is a good idea. Come up with a template and just submit it to all the fire districts. Absolutely. A couple of minor things I noticed just in some of these paragraphs under the general fund line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
page 3, page
On
4,
page 2, on page 2
page 2.
still. So
Yeah.
the fifth line down, the sentence starts in fiscal 26, the town's general fund expenditures is budgeted. Should that be are budgeted?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that, and then under the enterprise funds paragraph, line 2, just I would take out and the like in that sentence. They generate revenues from user fees and the like, and are largely self-sufficient. I just think that's a little clunky. I don't know what everyone else thinks, but
Yeah, I
So,
think it's
so the reason I have that in there is I think airport makes money by selling fuel, right?
that's true. So I guess user fees and services, or I just think there might be a better way to, you know, portray that, I guess.
Mark Milner, do you have a thought on that? I'm more than open to a change.
Yeah, you can just say something like, and user fees and other revenues.
Well, they generate revenues from user fees and other revenues is kind of,
Yeah,
Yeah,
Well,
Um,
you
right.
could write user fees and comma, in the case of the airport, fuel sales, comma, and are largely self-sufficient.
You could say user fees and sales because HYCC sells food and stuff, and various the
right.
Gulf
I
Enterprise
think
Fund sells
that's,
things, I'm sure too.
I think that's better of the golf. Yeah, golf certainly does, right?
yeah.
So I think user fees and sales.
Or
I
just
think
say
that's cleaner.
you could say primarily user fees and be silent on the others.
That's true. You could say
Yeah.
primarily from user fees.
Except is that true with the airport fuel sales? I thought that was actually quite significant. I'd have to go back and look.
Well, for the airport's an exception, but across all the enterprise funds, I would say primarily it's from user fees.
All right.
You know, but
Um,
either way is fine, I think. Primarily from user fees or from user fees and sales. I think either
I'll
one
just
of
use
those is fine.
primarily.
Yeah. Okay. That's fine. And then under capital expenditures, line 3, capital expenditures are expected to be 100.8. Should have
Million.
million after that.
Thank you.
So
Chris, you have a future as a copy editor.
well, try to catch what I can. So
No,
that's all I got on that
it's
page.
good. It's good.
Any other comments on page 2?
Nope.
Okay. Page 3. Anything anyone wants to discuss on page 3?
Nope.
I guess I'll be the guy then. Under residential exemption, there is one mistake there too. Line 2 in the parentheses should be which in, not which is. Right at the end of that line. But that's it on that page.
So I'm just sorry, it's under the residential thing.
Yep, the exemption, yeah. Line 2, the sentence starts the exemption, and then in parentheses, it says which is fiscal year 25.
Which in, got it right.
Right.
Sorry. Good.
Nope, that's fine. That's all I saw on that page.
Okay.
So going to page 4. I don't have any editorial changes on that. I don't know if anyone else has comments.
Looks good to me.
Yeah, and this is largely unchanged from last time.
If I may, the top half of that page, I love the fact that we've put things in thousands. I might suggest that in the pieces below that we also put those in thousands.
So we talked about that last time, and the problem is that some of these departments are so small that essentially when you start looking at the change from 25 to 26, it's zero. Even though there is a real change. So that you'll see a percentage, and I think I'd really prefer to keep this in whole dollars for those.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about amounts that are, less than a million, you want to keep it in real numbers. Town council budget's only $270,000. So,
Right.
And in each case, it would still be it would still be a whole number, but I won't
well,
argue
but
the case. I just think for
yeah,
consistency, it would be easier on the readers, and it would take away probably 25% of the digits on the page. But I won't argue.
Just one comment. The general fund expenditures chart, Tom, the second box, the second line of the second box labeled other expenditures, non-BPS education. Maybe we could put a space after between the S and the E. It looks like all one word.
So
Just
on my version, it looks correct. So that's interesting.
yeah, it has a space
yeah,
on
yeah.
mine as well.
I'm looking at the Word version that was circulated. Okay, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, on to page
Okay.
5.
I'm actually just bringing it up, Hector, to take a look at that. Just give me 1 minute.
Okay.
So, yeah, I think this, yeah, the space is there.
Okay,
Okay.
that's fine. It's a minor thing.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the way things display. But like I'm looking at the Word version and it seems okay.
Yeah, I'm sure it's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so page 5, I think, looks fine.
I have one comment on page 5. Planning. Oh, yeah, it's the same issue. The header planning and development is compressed in the Word version, but on the screen it looks fine. So, Mark, are you projecting the PDF version or the Word version?
This is the Word version.
Okay.
Okay, page 6, I think looks fine as well.
I see a couple of nits on page 6. The third section, Barnstable Public Schools. This is truly a nit, Tom. Second line, you've got a space before the word BPS. So just delete that space to line the margin.
You are correct.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. And then further down below public schools, the first bullet, you write the number of FTE actually declines. Do you mean FTEs
I certainly do.
with a lowercase s? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Page 7. I don't see any issues there.
Nope.
Page 8, same thing. I think that's fine.
And as mentioned, the FY23 numbers are now in there.
Okay.
They're now in there.
They're not in the one you're looking at.
They're not in what Mark is putting up on the screen,
Correct.
but they will
So,
be.
Mark, I sent this out to this was sent to Chris and then circulated to everybody a couple days ago, and I just got the numbers from Mark today. So it will be fixed.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
In our desire to show operating revenues and expenses and then a net, I'm not certain there's a lot of value in showing the revenues. I think people would rather see just expenses and headcount. And in the word net, as a financial group, I'm not certain that just a net is an appropriate description if we were going to even leave the word net in there.
Does that imply net income?
Or a loss. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it doesn't.
Would you prefer surplus loss, Frank?
But I don't know what the value is in showing the revenues, to be honest with you. It's just going to confuse people. They're more
I would
interested, I
actually
think, in what
think
they
there's an
spend.
enormous value in it. I mean, it's showing that, that there are, I mean, these revenues are coming as, from user fees and sales of stuff and so on. And I think, we described that these enterprise funds are essentially mini businesses that run often like private sector businesses.
But by definition, they must be self-sufficient with very few exceptions. So we'd only talk about the exception. If they're
Well,
not self-sufficient, then they would be a problem.
Yeah. I mean, I'd also note that in the budget, this is also displayed this way.
That
Rather than
doesn't.
It
saying,
is relevant to
doesn't
show
mean-
how healthy each enterprise fund is. If they're just breaking even, or if they're providing significant revenue, or if they're losing money and they need to be subsidized by the town. I think that is definitely relevant to the public.
So then when you show a number of them that are showing a deficiency, should we at least comment as to how they're going to make it up?
Well, I mean, then you get into how much information do you have in this overview? You know, do you want it to be concise and just numbers and minimal commentary? Do you want it to be more expansive? I mean, that's the struggle. What do you include and not include?
It's the decision of the group, but this will generate far more questions than it will answer. They're in fiscal 26, how many of them have a shortfall? Just about every one.
Well, I
Right, and
think the
yet
point
as
is that
noted,
they
they
can
all have,
take this document, and if they have more questions, they can look further at the more comprehensive budget documents of the town. This is
Yeah,
just strictly an
think-
overview.
I think that Tom addresses it by saying the HYCC is the only enterprise fund subsidized by the general fund. So that's the only one that has a shortfall.
Well,
Other than
the,
golf,
And it's in his text.
arena, and public access, and Sandy Neck, and solid waste.
I think the point is in 2026, as Frank is pointing out, there are a number of deficits on a budget, on a planning basis. They're forecast to have a deficit.
Um,
Which means they should be planning on cutting their expenses.
If I may, that represents the amount of surplus used to balance the budget.
They have reserve funds. Is that coming up on another chart?
so no, so everything's handled on one page here.
Okay,
The reserves are mentioned in the second paragraph.
I see.
So then the
And-
net refers to
Because
surplus
many of
created
the
or used.
enterprise funds have a reserve that they can call on in the event then that their revenue doesn't cover their expenses.
But
Yeah, as
Lillian,
noted there, it says the reserves in turn can be used for capital projects, balancing each fund's respective operating budget or for
Okay.
other town council approved requests.
Right.
And, that's what's going on. I think it's also important to note that, that if you look at the losses and so on, in the surplus and the gains on the net, they often net out as a positive. But again, every one of them has a reserve. The
Right.
problem I face in doing this is that we are limited to 12 pages. I would be happy to be expansive on here, but I just don't know where I could squeeze a word in here.
yeah, I think
So do you have a small paragraph on the reserves,
it's
or did you run out of space?
No, it's on the
it's
it's the
second paragraph on the page.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think you've covered yourself there, Tom. So I think it's okay. Lillian, is it true that the Hyannis HYCC is the only one of the 9 enterprise funds that regularly receives subsidies from the town over and
Yes.
above reserves?
Right.
Uh,
It's subsidized by the general fund. Or has been.
there is one other. It's a small subsidy for the Marina Enterprise Fund, very small.
And does that happen every year, Mark?
Yes, that'll expire soon. But back in, I think it was 2009 or 2008, we had the rebuild of the Barnstable bulkhead. Remember there, we had a
Yeah, I
problem
remember
there.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the council at that point in time decided to fund half of the annual debt service issue to do that capital repair out of the general fund. And the enterprise fund paid the other half. So yeah, it's a small subsidy that the Marina Enterprise Fund receives every year, but that'll
Mark.
expire in the near future.
Yeah, Mark, do you think it would aid the clarity on this page to have a sentence simply saying of the 9 enterprise funds, 1 receives regular subsidies from the town? Or do you think that's not needed here?
I think it's fine the way it is, but it's totally up to you guys. It's your report.
Yeah, yeah. I think the page is, I'm happy with the page, speaking for myself.
How about the word net effect on reserves instead of just net?
Where would you put that?
Where are we putting that?
Where the word net is in every case, it's basically the net effect on reserves is what I've just learned.
Where are you?
So is that, I
On
mean,
in the document where it says net, each one of those nets, the word net seldom is a financial term that sits there by itself. It's net something. So this is the net effect on reserves, effectively, is what I think I've just learned from the group. And I know I'm the new person on the block here. I have the least history on going through these numbers. You've all been through them. So maybe it's implied that it's the net effect on reserves.
I think Frank's right here. That would clarify a lot and just make it a little more clear of what this net is.
Do you think that's an appropriate way to word that, Mark? Net
Yes.
effect on reserves?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm fine with making that change. I think that's fine, but I think the point which I mentioned before, I mean, it's a 12-page report. If people have more questions about the idea is to get them to ask questions, get the top line numbers, and then if they want to learn more, they can dig in deeper to the town's finances. I mean, you can't cover all these things. Like Mark said, there's a small subsidy for the marina, there's subsidies for the HYCC. You can't go through all those things line by line in this report.
Yeah,
So
I can make the net effect on reserves change, so consider it done.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
there we go.
And Mark, just one clarification. So under the HYCC, the net is negative 523,000. So is that made up entirely from dipping into HYCC reserves? Or
Correct.
does a subsidy come in?
No, that's
to-
their reserve being used.
Okay, all right. Yeah, net effect on reserves, I think works.
And that's the one, the HYCC is the one that should be getting subsidies from the general fund. They shouldn't be charging the kids that have no money to go and play, if you will.
Right.
That's the point.
Okay, so moving on to page 9, the fire districts. I think that looks fine. It's clean. It has the links to all the individual districts for anyone who wants to find whatever
Yeah.
information they can.
Yeah, and I guess next year when we're able to get more information, we can add that.
Yeah, I think it was a great idea, Frank, to come up with some kind of template to request this information from the districts, so we can have that in advance next year.
I think they'll comply. I think they'd be embarrassed not to.
I would think it won't be a problem, yeah.
I do like visually how this page is the least filled page, and I think it represents our lack of information about the fire districts. So I think it works in a lot of ways. So
Do you think there's too much white space at the bottom?
no, I think it's the perfect amount of white space because
Okay.
we couldn't fill it. If we knew more, we would.
There
We
you
could
share
go.
it.
we could label it doodle here.
Yeah, take a break.
Intentionally left blank. There you go.
Right.
Okay,
All right, page
That's
10
good.
then.
page 10.
I don't have any problems with that page. I think that's fine.
That looks fine.
Was 10 capital spending? I've got it as 11.
Yes, 10 is capital spending. Yep.
Is there any chance we could give more details of the 100 million? We list those 5 items that total 10. So there's another 90 million, or are they all so small that there's nothing that can be highlighted?
You mean those bullet points, those individual items?
The town's going to spend $100 million, and I think most people are interested on what? So we've given them 3.91211. We've given them 5 items that total less than 10 million. So the question that comes to mind is, what's the other 90 million? Are there any larger items?
Well, yeah, what was the largest individual item, Mark? Do you know?
66 million was for the comprehensive wastewater management plan. I believe that was 45 million for the Finney's Lane neighborhoods and 16 million for Centerville South.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think bullet points on those CWMP projects would be appropriate since that's the lion's share. I mean, that's 60%, 66% of the capital spending.
Mark, maybe what I could do is, we were putting highest rated projects in here. Why don't you just the 5 largest projects, and if you could just send me an email with the 5
Okay.
largest projects.
Yeah,
That would
that's
be
a good idea.
I think that makes
Okay.
more sense to
Yeah,
Frank's
the
point.
5
They're the
largest
highest
projects
rated.
sounds,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I suggest in the bullets, we be consistent with the number, how many digits after the decimal point.
Yep.
Thank you.
I think so the budget, the box up above goes one decimal. So maybe that's what you use in the bullets.
Yep.
If I could, though, without adding any more work to Tom, it is important, the nomenclature or the descriptor of highest rated projects. So every project, as you know, goes through a rating system and a ranking system. And even though it may not be the biggest project, dollar volume, this is the recorded rating by either the department heads themselves or the town manager. So even though 3.95 may not be a big number to you, it's certainly it fits the description of Tom's wording, which is highest rated.
Okay,
Well,
well,
maybe we
there
could-
is
That's a good
space on this
point,
page,
yeah.
so that's a good point. We can leave
Very
those
good
highest
point.
rated projects and add the highest dollar amount projects as well.
Yeah, we've got space.
You know, there is space for another paragraph there.
There is. I can do
Yeah.
both.
So,
Yeah.
All
yeah,
right.
Okay,
all
that's a
right.
good idea.
I think
Okay.
for many taxpayers, the fact that sewers don't come on high on the list and that these things are much higher ranked than getting them sewer, that would get a lot of people wondering about the ranking system.
Just a point of clarification. So the CWMP projects can go through the ranking system because they have an independent funding source. The ranking system is used for the projects that are competing for the limited sources within the capital trust fund for financing.
Yeah, so when that January meeting happened, we were not, or the department heads weren't talking about CWMP projects. Is that right, Mark?
That's correct.
Yeah, so that's why I put these in there. I didn't include any CWMP because that wasn't part of that group.
Yeah, which I think to Jim's point, having the highest rated projects is important, but it's kind of the elephant in the room not to include something on that $66 million.
Yeah, so I think if we had
spending,
if we had a separate section of, and then CWMP, there is a different process in saying that.
Yeah, I think after those bullets, just
yeah.
adding something on the CWMP costs. That's fine.
So then you have the highest rated projects and the biggest projects following that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's
I
good.
think that makes sense, yeah.
Excellent, thanks.
Everybody's happy.
Yeah, we are. We're easy to
So,
please.
there you go. Speaking of CWMP, our next page, page 11, that's fairly unchanged from year to year as far as the content, so I think everything looks fine on that. Unless anyone has any comments.
So I actually do, because I didn't understand something here. Non-traditional solutions such as cranberry bog conversions. Can you explain what that, I mean, maybe I just don't know what it is.
Yeah, so they did, I believe it was a state program, right, Mark, to rehab unused cranberry bogs back to like their natural state to help with nitrogen.
Yes, there's a bog out on River Road and Bog Road out in the Mills that is no longer an active cranberry bog. Barnstable Clean Water Coalition, along with state, has a project ongoing out there where they're converting the bog back to its, as Chris stated, their natural state. And the Marston's Mills River runs through there, and the thought behind that is that the returning it to its natural state will allow the vegetation out there to remove quite a bit of nitrogen from the Marston's Mills River before that nitrogen reaches the Prince Cove area where that river flows down into.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is there any chance on the bullet on the connections near the bottom of the page that we could refer to some type of a range? I hear that connections for a flat, short connection could be as low as $2,000 in some cases. There's an awful lot of, let's say, anxiety amongst people not knowing what that connection cost is.
I don't know what the costs are. Is 2,000 an accurate number or is that a guess?
Well,
I don't know that it is. I've heard it third hand that someone said they were happy because it only cost them $2,000 to connect to the sewer, and they were told it would be 30,000.
Yeah, so it's very dependent on the individual property and how the house is situated and how the septic system was designed, previously, how it goes into the house. So I think it's difficult to put an accurate range on there because
But there are hundreds
we don't know
of
what the
them that
top end of
installed.
that range would
I
be,
think- I
Um,
think it was just
and all-
referred to DPW. Kelly Colopy has done a ton of work on this. I would just do a URL link to their site if people want to know more information. That's a rat hole. But she has done a yeoman's job on explaining what these connection costs are. And I would highly recommend you just do a URL link to their website if someone wants to know more information.
But how about assessment fees? That's a separate fee that Frank is saying somebody paid 2,000. Is there,
No,
is
well,
there
no, those
also
are different
no,
things.
I was referring to connection, the assessment.
Connection, he
Oh,
said.
okay.
It's capped at 10, but
Oh, yeah.
people were very happy with the connection because it was only $2,000, and
Right.
the rumor mill told them it would be much more.
Right.
No, all we can say at this point is that the connection cost is going to depend on the contour of your land and how far you are from the street, the plug, and we can't say any more than that. And if the DPW booklet also says that, so we really can't begin to second guess this because because it's very personal.
But hundreds and hundreds of these have taken place, and many of them are being financed through these. So that information exists. We're not giving anyone's personal information. We're trying to give a range that if it could be as low as $2,000, I think a lot of people would breathe a sigh of relief if they're flat and short. If you're downhill and have to pump it uphill, as some of us have to, then it will be much more. But there are a whole lot of flat short runs that may only be $2,000, and that information does exist.
Yeah, to Jim's point, I mean, if we're gonna do anything, I would just put a link to
Yeah, I
um,
would add a link.
if it'll fit.
I did this, and there's a link at the top, the Barnstable Water Resources.
For the water resources, yep.
Yeah, you can go right there and you'll get it.
So you can get data on the range of connection costs that people have paid to
There's-
date?
There's not I've checked it and there's not a range right now because it's too risky to give that range.
Well, I
And
think what
because you
Frank
don't,
is saying
one,
is,
because you don't know when you're going to be connected.
right,
If you're connected next year, it's one price. If you're connected 10 years from now, we can't anticipate what the inflation rate is or what the cost will be. So that's all we can do is to say,
right.
I'm not asking to predict the future. I'm just trying to give information rather than asking the people that read this. Very few people may read this.
well, they
If
can
we
go
knew
to
a
that,
range.
they can go to the link.
Well, I think the point is we don't know a range, so
We
But
don't
someone
have it.
does.
ourselves.
Someone
Well, that's
absolutely
fine.
does.
That information may be out there,
It's-
but it's not. We don't have that information. We don't have that range to say this is what the range is on connection costs because we don't know.
And if it's at today's cost, we don't know what tomorrow's cost will be. So
I'm just asking for
we simply
historical,
can't do
Lillian. I'm not
that.
asking for projections. Just historical exists and people do know it. And I'm just saying it would be nice to give people, because that's what I'm asked. Do I have any idea what people have spent? And my answer is, I know what a couple of people have spent because they told me. So people know.
So
The information does exist.
The question is, who are those people that know? Like, do the companies know? Well, I imagine they do because they're the ones doing the work, but does the town government know? And I guess that's the question, that if they do, then it would be easy for us to get. But if it's spread out between private businesses and individuals, do we have a database where people can share that info?
But it says right here in our that you can get a 0 to 2% interest. So someone's funding that loan and they know the amount of the loan.
So would you say the state has this information? Mark, do
The
you know if the
information-
state
the-
has that information?
The information has to be in like 6 sources.
Yeah, the loans that Frank is referring to are those who take advantage of the Cape Cod Aqua Fund, as mentioned in the report here. They can finance their connection costs as one option through the Cape Cod Aqua Fund. I think Cape Cod 5 offers a loan program for sewer connection costs. But some people may just pay it out of pocket. Some people may take a personal loan. That cost is not borne by the town of Barnstable. It's borne by the individual property owner. And so whether or not they're sharing that cost information with the town is totally up to them. We can't require them to report to us what they incurred for a connection cost. But there are, I'm sure, several who have shared this information with Kelly Colopy over at DPW. So she would be the best resource to go to, and perhaps just refer the readers to DPW for any information that they may have on the connection cost. I'm not aware of a database that Kelly has. If I don't know if any of you are aware. I haven't asked her that question, but I can find out.
Jim, do you know, does she have some kind of database, or she just is familiar with it?
I don't, but I've seen her presentations, and I've been, I spoke with her when we wanted to take a look at a different formatting of our report. So I've had a couple of conversations, and I know that she collects all kinds of information on her site. And as a matter of fact, it's one of the few that is not on the town of Barnstable. They have their own website for all this types of information. So as Mark suggested, probably just contacting her, she could give you a feel, Frank, as to what those numbers are.
Yeah. So is that through that Barnstable Water Resources site?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so that's on the page already.
Yeah.
I won't argue it anymore, but we give them three bullets. We tell you the first one won't be more than 10,000. We tell you the third one is $450. And the one in the middle, we say, we don't know, or we won't comment on. And we could comment if we chose to, but it's not worth the argument that we're having. You got plenty of other things to argue about.
I think, Frank, maybe you could undertake to reach out to Kelly and just say, hey, we have this question about connection costs. Is there a range that you're aware of that we could put in our report to give some context to the reader? She might say, I know a couple, she might not know. On the other hand, she might, but I think somebody ought to reach out to her. And Frank, if you know her, maybe it makes sense for you to make that call and let
I would
Tom
gladly
know.
do that. I would gladly do that. And call some of the firms that are putting them in.
Yeah.
Well, I think we don't want, I mean, it isn't appropriate, I don't think, for us to put in a town report information from private companies on what they're charging for connection fees.
Right.
The problem is, I get your point that the first bullet gives a dollar amount, the third bullet gives a dollar amount. The point with the second one is it could be any dollar amount. You don't know on any individual property. The sky's the limit on what the potential cost is, because there certainly are properties that are costing $30,000 or $40,000 to hook up. That's
Yeah.
a real number for some properties.
Maybe under the
What
second bullet,
we
we
could do,
say
I'm gonna
connection
make
costs.
I'm gonna make a suggestion on the sewer usage fees. We could just say the fees will vary depending on the usage, and just take away the $450 a year, because we don't know when you're going to be connected.
The
At this-
450 is good information now. That's the rough estimate. This is what people worry about. Taking it out is not the right answer.
Well, so where did you get that expected average of 450 a year, Lillian? Is that from a town report?
Yes, from Mark.
Okay, so if that's coming from town data, and
Right, it is.
the assessment fee is coming from town data, but we don't have a town data source
No, because
or average connection costs or
the rate.
range of connection costs.
That's correct. And don't forget that some individuals might need to have a grinder pump. And even though the town will buy the grinder pump, the resident has to pay for the installation. So, it gets complicated.
Right, there's a lot of variables with
There
that.
are lots
Absolutely.
of things that have taken into a consideration. So I suggest there's a homeowner's guide for sewer connection that is put out by DPW. And that doesn't have any estimates of costs for connection. It just tells you the general procedure.
Maybe we could beef up the second bullet, the connection cost bullet, to start out, Tom. Consider writing connection costs will vary widely, period. They will depend, among other things, on the contour of the property, the distance of the house from the road, and multiple other factors. And just explain what we've all been talking about here, that there's a wide variability. Just be more emphatic about how how we can't characterize a typical cost. That would be my suggestion.
All right, I'll make that change.
Everyone satisfied with that? Or
Yeah, I think
any-
that's a good idea, Hector. I think clearly we're frustrated by this, and I think we can convey to
Yeah.
to the
I'll give
public
in.
that it's
I'll
a
give
fr-
in.
So what
it's a
are we
frustrating
saying? Are
That's
element.
my case.
that connection
Something like what I
connection
just said,
costs will vary
very
depending on
widely.
the contour of the individual property?
Yeah, will
They
vary. They'll be
Will
all
they
vary.
over
know
the
that.
map.
The
All over the
taxpayer
map.
knows that. The people
Yeah.
know
Will
that.
vary.
They're looking for information. The people already know that it varies. They're wondering, since hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these have gone in, someone knows the range. It's is as low as 1,000 and as much as 100,000. That would be okay. Someone knows that range, and it's not
Well,
that difficult to
see
find.
what
Right, but-
Kelly tells you, Frank, when you call her.
Yeah,
Maybe she can give
Yeah,
you some good information.
honestly, Frank, at this point, why don't you call Kelly and just email me the information?
I will. I will. Sounds good.
Are you gonna try to put in a figure here? I think that's awfully risky.
Let's see what Kelly comes up with, and then we can decide.
if Kelly can provide an actual range, I think that's okay. You know, if it's an empirical data set. But if it's just a guess of what the range would be, I think that's irresponsible to put in there.
Right, I agree with you.
How about one contractor told us the range was X to Y?
Yeah, no, again, I don't
That
think
I
you should
wouldn't
put
No, no,
information
no,
in from private,
Okay.
companies, because it's a town
Okay.
document. So
Okay.
that's the hang up here. But if Kelly can provide town information with a figure, I'm okay with that.
I'll contact
How does
him.
everyone else feel?
Yeah, I think let's see what Frank comes up with, and then we
Oh.
can go back and forth by email if need be.
Well, don't forget that the amounts that she comes up with are based on today's dollars.
Right.
And I'll
So we
make
say
that.
Right, well,
connection
even-
And you
costs,
know,
connection
some
costs
some
up
of the
until
sewers are
now.
not going to be
Yeah.
connected for 10 years and 15 years. So I really think that giving a dollar cost is risky.
Okay, well, we can characterize the cost as,
Yeah, why don't,
up
yeah,
to
I
this,
think,
up to October of
I think a
2025.
I think I've toyed with this a great deal because I understand the residents' dilemma. They do want to know how much it costs, but we really can't give them a precise amount.
Right, I agree.
I would say if Kelly can provide a number that, residents have reported basically that connection costs have ranged between this amount and this amount as of 2025.
Based on today's dollars.
Right, as
Right.
of 2025.
Exactly.
Would you be comfortable with that, Lillian? And also state that costs are going to vary widely and will increase in the future. Because that's just the nature of it.
I don't think you need to say widely. Vary is vary.
All right, I think
Widely is redundant.
I think we've beaten this horse enough. That's my opinion. Frank, see what you come up with, and then
I
you
will.
My problem is if we're going to take a vote on this tonight,
Yeah.
are
We
we
may
going to
not-
change a section of it via email outside of a meeting? We can't have
Yeah,
a substantive discussion on it.
maybe we'll need to have another meeting if that's
I would withdraw my question then if it's going to hold everything up. It's not worth that. This is this is not worth what we're grinding through. It is probably the number one question that any taxpayer has that's going to have sewer over the next 30 years. They're wondering what that is. But let's not hold up this report for that. I can live with the way it is without any numbers in it.
Okay, let's move on
Okay.
then.
All right, then.
Thank you.
We'll go to another page of contention here. Looking ahead.
All right, so on this section, what I did, Chris, is, as you probably saw, I sort of looked at the various public comments we got and some of the emails that came around from committee members, and just took a crack, because I was the principal author of this section last year, of just trying to come up with a series of bullets that I think are reasonable, that reflect Tom's excellent wording, but I've tried to tighten it up in a couple of places. Anyway, my suggestion, Chris, you're the chair, you decide, but my suggestion is we work from what I circulated about an hour and a half ago, or 2 hours ago.
Yeah, so my only problem with that is that it was, not submitted with more notice. So quite
Okay.
honestly, I haven't been able to read through the whole thing yet. So
Okay.
I've not looked at it.
I would like to go off of Tom's, and certainly any of your comments from what you wrote up, we can consider. I do think the zoning and wind project bullet that Tom added, I appreciate him adding that. I think it needs to be expanded into 2 separate bullets.
And that's what I
A
did
little
in
bit
my,
stronger. Yeah, I
Yeah.
see that. I
Yeah.
haven't had a chance to look through it,
Yeah.
word by word. I think they do need to be 2 separate bullets. And I think, particularly Mr. Schulte's, testimony is very compelling, with Mark L's making comments that even though the status of these projects is up in the air right now, the first one's already being done still, the second and third, and potentially future projects are still up in the air, but the town is considering all of that in its planning and its financial decisions and its infrastructure. So it absolutely has to be in the looking ahead, because it will have a financial impact on the town, no matter what.
I agree.
So I don't know how everyone else feels about that.
Well, I'll just say from my perspective, I just don't think it's necessary to expand further on the wind farm. Looking ahead in the looking ahead section, I think the mechanism that we have in place and have embraced is the CWMP funding model. And that's our tool as advisors to the town as to how to proceed on cases like this. So, but with that said, I am happy to vote with whatever the consensus of the committee is. I just wanted to share with you my personal opinion. But I will be more than comfortable if we want to include this. I'm happy to support it.
Yeah, I think we all agree that zoning, land use, and wind farms are areas of concern. On the other hand, our committee doesn't want the public, from our report, to think that CFAC is experienced and knowledgeable about these particular issues, because we have not been involved with them. So I think that the bullet that Tom has put together recognizes very appropriately and accurately a description of the areas of concern. And so I agree with Jim on this. We're not working on these issues, and I don't think that this is a CFAC financial report. This is not the town council report. It's not a community action report. It's a financial report. And I feel uncomfortable about our saying all these things about zoning or the wind farms, even though I agree that they are important and are coming down the pike. I don't want the public to think that CFAC is working on them and is knowledgeable about them, because we haven't. by, I think Tom's description is accurate, it's appropriate, and says what we need to say, that they can have short-term and long-term impacts on the budget. And that's more than sufficient.
So I appreciate the comments, but if your thought is that because CFAC is not actively working on that subject, then a whole bunch of these bullet points would be taken off. We haven't done anything on private roads as the part of this committee. We have not.
I'm going to give you some background on that for those of you who have not been on CFAC for the last 13 years. CFAC hasn't been, in fact, involved with the private roads
Well, I mean
issue.
currently, I mean right now, looking ahead in fiscal 26,
Well,
is that the argument you're making?
no, I'm not making an argument. I'm merely giving you information that when CFAC meets with the town manager annually, and I don't know whether you did that this year, but we always talk with the with the town manager about key issues. And the issue of roads has always come up. CFAC has been involved with this private road issue since 2013, and we have monitored this, and we have a regular discussion with the town manager about it every year. I don't know whether you had it this year, but last year when I was the chair, we had that, and the year before. So we have been involved with it.
Well, involved, I mean, the town's not taking any action, I guess is my point. The town is not taking any of these private roads as of right now.
But
So,
that is the issue that we have had a running conversation about. Because the
right,
private
well, offshore wind has been a running conversation as well.
private road maintenance is that financing is shared with the old sewer fund. And so
Yeah.
there is concern.
Well, I guess I just don't follow the logic that uh, you're thinking offshore wind isn't really worthy of
Well, we have
scrutiny.
CFAC has not been involved with the
I
offshore
don't think it
wind
matters
farm.
if we are directly involved. The point is the town is involved and CFAC is advising the town on fiscal matters. And the
But
offshore wind
we
projects
have not been
do and
asked, we
will.
have not been asked, as far as I know, and my memory may be bad, but I don't recall that CFAC has been asked by either town council or town leadership to look into this offshore wind.
Chris,
That's
can I
what I'm
make a
saying.
comment?
Neither have we been asked to look
We
at
have
private
not been
roads.
actively involved.
So Chris, I'd like to just make a general comment. So when I proposed this section last year, my thought was to lay out for the readers in layperson's language some of the issues that are coming down the pike for the town council, the town manager, and indeed for taxpayers in the upcoming fiscal year and in fiscal years beyond it. And what I thought, what I endeavored to do in constructing the 7 or 8 bullets that I wrote last year was to flag some of the biggest issues. I agree with you, Chris, that this private roads topic, I think that is that's the lowest priority of any of these issues. If I'm not mistaken, Mark Ells just flagged the private roads issue in the context of possibly taking one or more private roads in conjunction with sewer installation. But there's no chance in hell that this town is going to embark on a wholesale taking of some of the thousands of private roads. That's just not going to happen. And it's not a topic for the town council to worry about. The town council has got to worry about CWMP. It's got to focus on, as Tom wrote about, national economic factors, interest rates, inflation, and so forth, and how that's going to impact the operating budget and the capital budget. The town council is very focused on drinking water and pollution. The gap between revenues and expenses at the schools is something that's coming down the pike. Maybe not this year, but it's going to have to be dealt with. The developer's plans to install massive onshore infrastructure in connection with 3 offshore wind projects poses major financial challenges to the town. One example would be there is a lot of research that shows that if you have high voltage power lines going close to properties, that can result in a diminution in the value of the property, which can in turn translate into lower assessments and a diminishment in tax revenues associated with those properties, and then so forth and so on. Barnstable needs to be competitive and attracting employees. That's a big issue. Creating more housing for low and moderate income families, big issue. Town has to deal with financial consequences of revised zoning ordinances, another big issue. So that's my concept for this looking ahead. Inclusion in this list of issues doesn't hinge on whether CFAC has now or 13 years ago been asked by the town manager to take a look at a topic. These are the major issues that I contend that this town has to focus on going forward. And that's my concept. And whether or not CFAC has studied them or been asked to analyze them, I don't think is relevant. What's relevant is what are the realities facing this town? And that's what I would ask committee members to consider when they, if we need to take a vote on this section, I'm happy to do that. But that's my vision for this section.
Well, I agree with you that these are issues that are coming down the pike.
Well,
But
thank you very much for that, Luann.
again, I think that bullet that talks about zoning, land use, and wind farms is adequate.
Lillian, that language, and no offense to Tom Keene, but it's a throwaway bullet at the end of his roster of bullets. It's as anodyne a comment as you can make. It conflates zoning and offshore wind when, as several of our public commenters have pointed out, they're two very distinct issues facing this community. So, I agree that Tom got in the word wind into the last bullet, but it doesn't begin to capture the magnitude of the issue and what will happen to the town going forward and what town council and town manager will have to focus on. So, I agree with that. He got it in, Tom got it in, and that's to his credit, but it needs to be fleshed out, as Chris said, and we need to break out these issues and concentrate, focus the reader's attention on what we think are the major issues facing the town in the current fiscal year and in future years. So that's my perspective.
Just for my clarification, I think between the emails, we're all talking about wind here, that we're debating one bullet, which is not a very long bullet, that Hector has recommended, and a number of town citizens have written about asking us to do it. And we have the room on the page. So
yep.
We have the room on the page. We have a number of people writing to us asking us to do it. Why wouldn't we do it?
Well, I think, Frank, it's we're not supposed to be, a body that just responds to lobbying on this. It's supposed to be the judgment of the members here as to what they see as significant financial issues. If you believe this is a significant financial issue, I think that's the way it really should be stated here.
I do believe it is. I absolutely do. No
I
doubt
would
about
suggest the following. Hector had sent around a bullet relating to, let me pull it up, Hector. So in his bullet said in part, the developer's plans to install infrastructure associated with 3 offshore wind projects pose major financial challenges and other risks to Barnstable. It's critical that town leaders evaluate the short and long-term impacts, both negative and positive, on town revenues and expenses. It goes on to talk about the two of the three projects are on hold, but contracts haven't been terminated and so on. But I think the first two sentences there, Hector, would seem to me to make sense and put those in as a bullet on this looking ahead.
My critique is that they pose financial challenges and other risks seems fairly negative as a viewpoint of wind farms. And correct me if I'm
Right.
wrong, but there also seem to be potential benefits from these that I think also should be listed in the first sentence.
I think you're
I
probably
want to
right.
echo, I'd like to echo Jeremy's comments. There are many people in the community that believe that the wind farm are a very strong facet of our community. It could be financial, it could be energy related, environmentally. So I think the language should be, if we can come up with a neutral language,
Yeah.
it's, if we want to track it, let's track it, but both for the good and areas that need to be improvement.
Right. No, I agree with you on that, Jim
Yeah,
and Jeremy. And
I
it,
agree
it needs to
too.
be neutral because it's not even about making a commentary on whether it's going to be positive or negative. It's just this is a massive looming thing on the horizon for Barnstable. Part of it's already in place, part of it's on hold, but no matter what, there will be a fiscal impact. You know, there's an expected fiscal impact if it moves forward, and that obviously that won't happen if it doesn't move forward. So to me, I think all of Tom's bullets are fine except that last one. I would break it up into two separate bullets, one on the zoning and land use. Even if you want to reference back to the Hanover apartments that we did just review, that had a significant fiscal impact on the town, and future projects will also have a significant impact on the town. And that's something that had to go through the ZBA. So again, it's related to zoning and land use. So that's one bullet in my mind. And then the offshore wind is a second bullet that, you know, I think, again, the first couple of sentences, I would make the language more neutral on hectares. There are plans for further offshore wind infrastructure in the town of Barnstable, which will have significant impact on fiscal, however you want to word it, but neutral.
I wrote evaluate the short and long-term impacts, both negative and positive, on town
But
revenues and expenses. I wrote it,
I
neutrally,
think
I
the
thought.
other risks is really the biggest, editorial comment in there that should be taken out.
Oh, I
Okay.
Because
agree.
again, we're looking just at fiscal impact, period.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Can
can
I-
we
can I-
discuss,
let
I'd
me-
like to comment on Hector, Hector, with regards to, I thought that the work that we did together on the CWMP funding model, I thought that really addressed those types of decisions that would have to be made based on whether there was or was not income flow in a range of categories. And it would be the tool that the town staff and town council would use in their decisions moving forward. Is there, if I'm mistaken in that, anyone can chime in and help me out. If not, I'd like to see if that can also just be, we
So-
have a tool. We're not
so
without
as-
tools. We're not
Yeah.
without data, right? This is not a guess. We do have data and we have tools that can analyze data.
Yeah.
Okay. I,
Let me jump in
again,
there.
I think there's a negative. I
I-
think there are a variety of risks that are financial in nature that flow from the installation of this offshore wind infrastructure in town. The cables under the beaches, the 20 miles of high voltage cable conduits underneath residential streets, next to water pipes that could be heated up and introduce bacteria into the water, which will in turn, create a need to remediate that. And then, of course, the high voltage substations being built on green space out near Route 6. And then there's one of the risks,
I'm gonna-
Jim.
I'm
One
gonna
of
It
the
really does
risks,
sound like you're editorializing at this point.
Yeah, you are.
but
I'd
one
like
of the
to
big
go,
risks
I'd like
is
to
the
go back,
risks to
I'd like to
property
go back to
values.
the point that Jim was making.
Mhm.
Do we have the mechanism to deal with this wind farm presence, it seems to me we have the host community, and then we have the personal property tax. So isn't that mechanism in place at this point? So that if an additional wind farm decides to have transmission lines come ashore, would that, and we have a host community agreement with them, would those same financial
There are a
Well, there's
host
a
of
separate
risks.
agreement with every project, no matter what,
Right.
anyway. They're individual agreements depending on the project.
And there's a host of risks that aren't captured in
but
the
I
host
don't think,
community agreements.
I think, let's go back, could you Tom, could you read those first two sentences again?
And it's somewhat, here's what I would suggest for the wind farm. A developer's plans to install massive infrastructure associated with 3 offshore wind projects potentially pose major financial benefits and challenges to Barnstable. It's critical that town leaders evaluate these short and long impacts on town revenues and expenses.
That's perfect.
Sounds great.
That's done.
I think that's fine as an individual bullet point. And
That's
again, I would
perfect.
do a separate one for the zoning, mentioning
Yeah.
that.
Okay, so
I
So
think
Tom, I'm okay with that. I would prefer to leave the other language in, but I'm happy to compromise. As far as the other bullets, there's a bullet on, again, I've circulated it to the committee, and apologies if people haven't had a chance to look at it. There's a bullet on attracting high quality employees. There's a bullet on creating housing for more for low and moderate income families, the zoning challenges, tax incentives, et cetera, possible direct investment by the town. And then the third bullet has to do with financial consequences of revising zoning ordinances. So, and those 3 bullets I took out of last year's looking ahead section, which I drafted, which Jim Sproul helpfully reworked, and which this committee voted for last year. So my presumption is, the facts haven't changed, and it shouldn't be too controversial to restate those bullets from last year.
okay. On your first one, Hector, on the schools, you have something about, I like what Tom has put down for the schools, which was the BPS's express desire for new school buildings. If you remember the schools building subcommittee met with us, and
Yeah, I do remember my issue with
and
that,
that's why,
Lillian.
and I
My
think
issue,
this, I think
my
this is
issue
why-
with that,
I think this is why the Tom used the express desire,
no,
because
the Barnstable Public Schools have not, to my knowledge, this committee has expressed interest in a possible new elementary school building, but it's not my understanding that the Barnstable Public School System has come out and requested that of town. That's why I've phrased it a little differently from Tom.
do you think that the schools building subcommittee does not speak for the
I
school?
don't, it's a subcommittee of the school committee, and no, I don't think it speaks for the committee. My wording
Well,
was for everybody
we
to
don't know
listen
that. I
to.
mean, I can't believe that a subcommittee would go off on a wild tangent.
No, they came to us and they said, this is what we're thinking about. It's not my understanding that the school system has formally recommended this. So what I've written I rewrote Tom's first bullet: funding for CWMP, major school renovations, and a possible new elementary school building will require careful financial planning. I thought that was a better way to phrase it, but I'm not going to go to the mat on this one. I just wasn't.
I think you're right from the perspective of capital. They want $122 million in capital for their improvement program plus a new school, I think the three of those things would be, I think that those are good topics.
Right, and that's what I wrote. Anyway, but you know, if this committee wants to hang on to Tom's language in that first bullet, you know, I'm fine with it, but I just thought it was not quite accurate. So that's why I rephrased it. I don't know, Tom, do you have any comments on my language?
Well, I think, you know, the term express desire, it doesn't mean they're definitely doing it. I honestly couldn't care either way, Hector.
Yeah, okay. Well, I don't either, but I just thought it was more accurate to phrase it the way I did. That's all.
Okay,
So-
so it sounds like we decided on a separate bullet for the offshore wind part of it,
Right.
and
So,
Can
another.
I ask a question? A question? It doesn't have to be included in our context, but I really, to my core, believe that the work that we did on that CWMP funding model in the report that we wrote, to me, I really believe that's a strong anchor for us to be able to help in understanding the financial modeling and requirements of all the projects in the town as it relates to the offshore wind projects. If I'm wrong in that, I'd like somebody to share with me their thoughts, because I don't want to hang on to something that's not accurate. But clearly, I thought we did a heck of a job, and at Mark's request in reviewing that and proposing that that's a major tool that the town has. And if I'm
Well,
wrong,
it
again, we
absolutely
don't
is,
need to
yeah.
spend time on it. But if I'm wrong, just let me know. I'm happy to adjust my thoughts.
I think you're right. That's absolutely a very useful tool for the town to use for financial planning, but I think it still needs to be expressed that the potential for additional offshore wind infrastructure will have a fiscal impact on the town.
Right.
yep.
We'll be able to model it, but it will have an impact.
Gotcha.
Okay. Do you want some kind of mention of the fiscal
Well,
model?
that's what I was shooting for earlier, but I don't want to go back. I just want to now. I'm just asking for clarification in my head.
Okay. Okay.
Chris, the other bullet you had wanted to have you focus on zoning and land use rules. Do you have language for that?
I was trying to think of something during this discussion, but I don't know if maybe something like zoning and land use policy, as well as the need for additional housing to attract and retain. I mean, however you want to word it, I guess. There's.
No, we got to resolve this.
So
I
look at
I
Don't
just
leave
think
it
there
up
should
to
be a
me.
separate bullet there for
Don't
the
leave it up to
zoning.
me. I get yelled at.
So look at the bottom bullet in my email. I would propose the committee consider that, you know, as a basis to start.
So I guess my question here is, why are we
Mm-hmm.
only looking at worker housing when we talk about revisions?
Yeah, I don't think it needs to be focused on housing, worker housing. It just,
Okay.
I don't know. And I mentioned earlier, I don't know if you want to
Yeah.
mention Hanover as an example of that, because that did
Yeah.
involve a lot of different zoning issues.
Yeah.
So that was
Maybe
kind of my thought,
so maybe revise the bullet to say financial consequences of revising zoning ordinances and changing land use policies must be carefully evaluated. This includes any potential strain on infrastructure and public services. How does that sound?
I think that would be appropriate. Yeah, just the town needs to
Give me
consider
that language
fiscal.
again, Hector. The financial
So
consequences of
it's financial
revising.
consequences of revising zoning ordinances and changing and modifying land use policies must be carefully evaluated.
Okay, I mean that.
Why don't you just say that changes to zoning and land use policies need to be evaluated?
Yeah, I mean,
Without all that
What
other
you just
stuff in
said.
there.
well, you want to get in with the financial aspect of it. That's the point.
Well, what you're saying is
Land use policies.
changes to zoning and land use regulations, and policies can have short-term and long-term impacts. That's
Which
good
is-
enough.
Which is sort of what the wind farm bullet says. We use exactly the same language.
Yeah,
Um,
well,
Yeah, I
whatever.
wouldn't use exactly the same language, but
Yeah.
How about, again, so let me read this and see if this sounds okay to people.
Okay, sure.
The financial consequences of zoning and land use policies and any revisions to them must be
Yep.
carefully evaluated.
Good.
perfect.
That's good.
I'm happy with
Excellent.
that. Yeah.
Excellent.
That's good.
Great,
Tom, you have a bright future as a rewrite man.
thank you. All right. So I think, are we okay on everything now?
So,
Yes.
yeah, I think we're good with all the bullets you had provided with that change to make the last one into those two separate bullets.
So
Okay,
the only thing that needs to be inserted are the enterprise fund figures.
Yeah, there's changes through here. So let me make a motion. Let me move that we approve this conditional upon me making the revisions discussed tonight, circulating them to the members of the committee, and absent an objection from the members of the committee, it is approved.
I will second that motion.
Yeah, I'll third it.
So,
And I will also commit, what's tomorrow, Thursday? No,
tomorrow's Wednesday.
Wednesday. I'm losing track. That's what happens when you have a holiday. I will commit to having this to you tomorrow by the end of the day. I will send it to Chris and Mark, who can then in turn circulate it. And I will
Okay.
also include a red line so that everyone can see the changes from this version.
Okay. I assume we need a roll call vote on that, Mark.
Yes.
The motion to approve,
So,
subject
yeah,
to changes.
before you take that vote, I just want to be clear that I understand what Tom's asking everybody to do here. Are you asking all committee members to reply to you via email whether or not they accept all the changes to this document or not? Because
So
that's
Mark,
conducting
help me on
committee
this.
business.
What I was actually saying is that absent objection from them.
Okay.
I'm worried that when we now have replying by email that we're violating open meeting.
Yes. I just want to make sure that everybody
You know,
understands.
I'd
that.
rather recommend that we have have another follow-up meeting on Monday. Just do another meeting. It's a half hour
Well,
legal subject. I know you're busy, but I mean, I don't want to be doing this by email. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree. It's sloppy to do it by email, for sure. So I don't know.
Well,
I have an extremely busy week next week as well, as I'm sure many of you do. I don't know.
Well, we can wait 2 weeks then if you want.
so let me, again, the point of my motion is that if for some reason you still have a problem with the language, then you can object and it's not approved. You object, Chris, and then it's not approved, and then we will have to have another meeting. But if you don't have a problem with it, we don't need to have another meeting.
I guess the question would be, how long do you have to object then?
I would say, why don't you object no later than 48 hours after receipt?
Okay.
Well, it may well be, as Jim suggested, that we tidy everything up on October 27th at the next scheduled CFAC meeting, if need be.
Is there-
Again, if someone objects, that's exactly what we'll do, Hector.
Okay.
And that, just for clarity, again, that objection, I guess it should go to me or Mark if someone has an objection.
I think it should go to you, Chris. Yeah, I mean, copy
Or
tomorrow.
the
But
chair.
please don't have it going to me. That would be
Yes, and
incorrect.
definitely do not have it going to all.
Yes.
Okay.
So, okay, if anyone objects, respond to me within 48 hours of receipt of the report.
Yeah.
Okay?
I'll take that as a friendly modification of my motion.
Would
Tom,
would we find out if there was an objection or if
Yeah,
there are no
If there's an
objections?
objection, I will notify the committee. Yes.
And if there's
I
no
get-
objections, we'll hear nothing more of this.
I guess I'll notify you either way, 48 hours after. Again, this is kind of why
Okay.
it's a little sloppy doing it this way, but
But
Yeah.
this is almost like the town council meeting the other night when they took a vote, but um
So
Statistically, someone's gonna
there's
have
a
an
good
edit.
role model.
Again, we've approved documents before in exactly the same way.
we have,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
So
so
I don't
that's
think
fine.
this is,
If
Okay.
anyone has an objection, let me know within 48 hours. Okay?
I move what Tom said in terms of process. I make a
Second.
actually, you
motion to
can,
approve.
I think it's already been moved, so,
Well,
Okay.
I guess it was amended, so
yeah,
I'll
okay.
second it as amended.
All
I'll
right.
call
Okay.
the question here.
What's this? What's that, Lillian?
Just
I'm
calling the
calling the question,
Oh,
so we need to vote.
we do need to vote. Yes. Can we get a roll call, Jeremy?
Most certainly. Hector Gunther,
Yes.
Tom Keen,
Yes,
Chris Lozon,
Yes.
Jim Sproul,
Yes.
Frank Ward,
Yes,
Lillian Wu,
Yep.
and I am a yes.
Excellent. So thank you
All right.
everybody for your work on that. And I know sometimes it gets a little contentious, but none of it's personal. So just remember that, everyone. Speak your mind freely. So we do still have two other items here, unfortunately, but next would be review of the fiscal policy discussion presentation to town council.
Yes, I thank you, Chris. So at the last town council meeting, we presented a topic of fiscal policy with the council to try to get some feedback from them, providing us some direction as to what our next step should be. I could go through the presentation that we made to the council. I can share my screen if you would like to do that.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
So Mark, can I just ask, so this was presented in the context of a quote unquote workshop by town council on fiscal policy, is that correct?
Yes.
And what was, stepping back from this presentation, which I thought was excellent, what was your objective in showing these slides to the town council?
Again, trying to get some direction from the council as to what fiscal policy we should be following. So I posed several questions, as you'll see in the presentation. We did not receive any direction as to what to do at this point. I will be back. I plan to be back before the town council the first quarter of calendar year 2026, so probably a January meeting with next steps.
Right. I think I recall watching this when you gave the presentation. I don't recall that you got that many questions from the town councilors.
Not many.
No. So I was just trying to understand what was the goal of this workshop.
So the goal is to get some answers to the questions that I posed on fiscal policy. So can you see my screen okay?
Yes.
yep.
All right, so, well, I started it with an operating budget overview for the general fund. The FY25 general fund budget performance in particular. Here's our favorable budget variance for our revenues. We had a favorable variance of over $14 million in general fund revenues in the areas of mostly in the areas of property taxes, motor vehicle excise tax, fines and penalties, and investment income. In regards to property taxes, what happened here is that we had a very strong year in collecting outstanding taxes that were due from prior fiscal years, FY24 and prior fiscal years. That's why the property tax number is so much higher above the budget. The budget only includes the FY25 tax levy. So we had a very good year for collections. That contributed to the excess on the line titled fines and penalties, because all of the additional charges and late fees that are associated with the late payment of your property taxes are included in that line item. So those two line items did very well due to those strong collections. Motor vehicle excise tax continues to be strong. Our commitments for that particular revenue category continue to see growth, and collections are strong there as well. And in terms of investment income, again, we conservatively projected our investment income purposefully, and we had a very good year for investment income generation. So those are the main factors that contributed to the excess revenues that we earned in FY25. As far as expenditures are concerned, we returned a total of $6.2 million in unspent appropriation across all departments. And that contributes to what you'll see as well, to the growth in our general fund savings. Here is the general fund, a 10-year history of our general fund savings.
A quick question. Was it really that, did we have that much snow in FY25? I saw the negative.
Yeah, yeah, $343,000 over what we budgeted, and it's really ice management when you think about it.
Okay.
Yeah, not a lot of snow removal. It's really ice management. So, there were a couple of storms, I think, where plows actually went out, probably more so on the main roads than the side
Okay.
streets.
It's
Yeah,
relatively
a lot of salt and
small,
sand.
but
Yeah. So this is a 10-year history of our free cash certification. We were estimating it to be certified on July 1, 2025 at almost 36.2 million. It actually came in at just over 36.2 million. I believe I sent that certification, a copy of that certification to you all. That included the general fund and the enterprise funds. But as you can see here, we used on the July 1st, 2025 line, the amount used for operations and capital, that includes what we used for supplemental appropriations in FY25 budget and what we used to balance the FY26 operating and capital programs. So that was 8.6 million for operations and 4.9 million for the capital program. So even though we used over $13 million to fund various capital items and fund various operating budget items, we generated almost 19 million between returned appropriations and excess revenues, which results in that growth in our surplus. Here's how we, in accordance with our revenue sharing agreement, here's how we distribute the free cash that gets certified between municipal savings, school savings, and other areas. First of all, we have town council has a 4% policy reserve, whereby we set 4% of the operating budget aside in a town council reserve. So that's $8.6 million. The additional is allocated to what we call the municipal savings and the school savings accounts, and those can be accessed with town council approval to fund various capital items in the operating budgets. So the municipal savings balance is 12.5 million. Schools are 14.6 million. Again, council reserves 8.6 million. And we have a small amount of money that the original amounts we received from the opioid settlement that went into the general fund at that time, because that's what the guidance from the Department of Revenue required us to do. But that can only be spent on opioid related expenditures, and so we keep that separate as well. So that's where how the $36 million gets distributed. Moving into the FY26 general fund budget, we had a 4.9% increase overall from the FY25 budget. Municipal operations were up just over 5%, school operations about 4.7%, other requirements 5% increase, for a total increase of 4.9%. That $10,571,000 increase in the FY26 operating budget. So how do we pay for that? Well, first of all, here's the key expenditure drivers in that budget. Our labor contracts, number one, were predominantly a service or organization, and it involves a lot of labor and associated benefits associated with that labor. So those are the key cost drivers in our annual operating budget from year to year. In addition, we receive 3 major assessments, school-related assessments for Barnstable students attending Commonwealth charter schools, the Regional Technical High School in Harwich, and Barnstable students opting to participate in the school choice program and go to other school districts for their education. So those assessments are all close to $15 million, as Tom has included in his report that we just reviewed. And so it's significant money. And those went up, I think, by over $1 million from FY25 to FY26. Of course, property casualty and liability insurance is becoming more and more of an issue for us every single year. Our exposure grows, premiums grow. What's happening on a national level impacts all of us, not just the town of Barnstable, all of us on a personal level. With these large, more severe weather-related events and the impacts they have on property, the claims that are being paid out impacts all of us in terms of higher premiums. And as we build out our sewer system, for example, or build a new facility, a new pump station, we grow what we need to insure in terms of the amount of assets. And so that has an impact as well. So that's going to be a major component of our budget growth going forward. Of course, we have aging infrastructure we have to maintain. We try to keep up with that through various capital appropriations to make sure that we keep our facilities in good working condition. And obviously, the CWMP is a major expenditure pressure for us. So how do we pay for the $10.5 million budget increase? Well, first of all, it's the property tax levy is the biggest component, individual component, that is. We're allowed to increase that base tax levy by 2.5% every year. That equated to $3.7 million in FY26. We're estimating, in addition to increasing the tax levy by 2.5%, we're allowed to add a factor for new building growth that didn't exist in the previous year. And so we estimated that at $1,250,000. It represents about $200 million of new building growth that wasn't on the tax rolls in the previous year. So you can add that to the tax levy. That's why our tax levy goes up more than 2.5% every year. We had a slight growth in our exclusions. We have a couple of exclusions that are not part of that 2.5% limitation under Proposition 2.5. That's the Cape Cod Commission assessment and the regional school district's assessment for the new, for the debt service for the new facility that they built in Harwich. Those 2 assessments increased by $33,000 for FY26. So we have a total increase in the tax levy estimated to be about $5 million. Then we set aside a portion of the tax levy every year for abatements and exemptions. And based upon our historical abatement and exemption activity, we feel comfortable reducing the amount that we set aside for that by $858,000. And so we can redirect that portion of the tax levy to our operating and capital budgets. So that gives us $5.8 million available towards funding that $10.7 million budget increase. So how do we make up the difference? There's quite a bit of a gap there. These are the various categories that make up the difference. We have basically state aid and local receipts are the remaining 2 categories. And if they can't fill that hole or that gap, then we go to our reserves to close that gap. And that's what we did in fiscal year 2026 because of the strong reserve levels that we have. State aid we had a slight increase of $475,000, mostly in the Chapter 70 category. Our excise tax, we're estimating at about almost a 3% increase of $309,000. It's mostly motor vehicle excise taxes. Fees, licenses, and permits, slight increase or 4% increase, mainly due to activity levels, not any planned rate increases for 2026. Investment income, we increased significantly by $1 million because we took in over 4.7 million last year. So we moved that up from 2 million to 3 million, essentially. And then our chargebacks to the enterprise funds for the services that are budgeted in the general fund that are provided to the enterprise funds, based on the formula that we've been using for years, approved by the Department of Revenue, reviewed by the Department of Revenue, approved by them. That increases $342,000. And so we're almost $2.1 million short. And so we had to rely more upon our general fund reserves. So that reliance went from 6.3 million to 8.4 million. So that's how we closed the gap to achieve $10.5 million of funding sources to balance that increase growth and expenditures for the general fund budget. And we did that realizing still experiencing a growth in our general fund reserves. So I just want to point that out. But it's not forever something we can do. We need to work ourselves off the reliance of those reserves. But due to the level that they were just certified at $36.2 million, it buys us time to strategically and thoughtfully implement reductions to reduce our reliance on those reserves over a period of time. And I'll show you how we plan on trying to do that. Just a little bit more about the local receipts analysis here. We could have reduced the reliance on reserves from $8.4 million down by another $3.8 million, but we'd still have to use over $4 million to balance the general fund operating budget if we did this. But this is a risky strategy. If we were to increase our FY26 budget estimates to closely resemble what we took in actually took in an FY25, we would have to increase them about another $3.8 million. And the risk you run into is that if you have an economic downturn and your motor vehicle excise starts tracking downwards, your investment income starts tracking downwards, your local activity levels for fees, licenses, and permits start tracking downwards, you run the risk of creating a revenue deficit. And we've always planned on trying to avoid experiencing a revenue deficit. They do happen, but we never had one because of the conservative revenue estimates that we use in balancing our budget. And this is one of the reasons why we generate reserves every year, replenishing what we use to balance the operating budget. But we don't want to get into the practice of pushing all of our estimated receipts up to the level of where they came in the previous year. The Department of Revenue encourages strongly for communities not to do this to avoid the potential of revenue deficits in the event that we have an economic downturn or a decrease in activity levels. So I just wanted to show you what that could have looked like if we adopted that very risky strategy, which we do not recommend. So this is a 5-year, not a projection, but targets that, and I emphasize targets that we would have to achieve in order to make this work. Again, not projections. I want to emphasize these are targets that we would have to make in terms of the amount of revenue we need to generate from various categories and what that type of revenue generation could fund in terms of a budget increase on an annual basis. So on line 2, if we targeted a 4.25% budget increase in FY27 and decreased that to 4% down to 3.5% by 2030 and 2031, our budget increase would essentially be about between $8 and $9 million a year for the general fund operating budget. And in order to pay for that, we would continue to raise the property tax levy by 2.5%, allowed under Proposition 2.5. We would need about $1 million of growth in state aid. We only got $475,000 in FY26, but we would need about $1 million of growth in state aid, $2 million growth in local receipts on an annual basis. That's really motor vehicle excise, investment income, and all fees, licenses, and permits. So we'd have to continue to see some activity level increases. Interest rates would need to stay where they are or improve. Local motor vehicle excise tax would continue to need to grow like it has been. And then we would need $2 million of new property tax growth every year. We got about 1.7 million in 24, 1.6 million in 25. We projected 1.25 in 26. It's going to come in at slightly higher than that. But 2 million is a substantial number that represents over $300 million in new building growth. So that's a target, not a projection. It's a target. It's what we would need to target for new growth. And so that means, we'd have to try to get growth from new development that ranges in the area of $300 million or over $300 million a year. And that would provide us the amount of revenue on line 8 that would essentially allow us to budget these percentage increases and eventually reduce our reliance on the reserves by a sum ranging from 77,000 to almost 900,000 a year. And so our savings balance at the beginning of all of this just got certified at 36 million. And that's the number on line 10 under the FY27 column. We'll call it $36 million. If we generate $5 million a year, we've been averaging a savings generation of just over 8 million a year, but let's call it 5 million, just to be conservative, because we're upping all of these revenue increases for local receipts and excise taxes and new property growth. We would need to use the savings used for the operations is represented on line 12, which is the difference between what we're currently using and what is generated or used on line 9. And then use a little bit of our savings every year to fund some smaller capital projects of $1 million, which is represented on line 13. You can see our savings balance will eventually drop from the 36 million that we just got certified at down to about 17 million by FY31. Still above what the town council's projected or town council reserve requirement of 4% of the operating budget would be, which is about 10.3 million. So, these percentage increases are going to be difficult that you see on line 2. Those percentage increases are going to be difficult to achieve because we need this kind of revenue growth. These are the targets that we would have to achieve in revenue growth in order to fund those size percentage budget increases. And so again, I emphasize those are targets. It's an illustration of what we would need to do in order to fund those types of budget increases, reducing our reliance on reserves, and eventually making sure that we keep an adequate amount of money in our savings to meet that town council requirement.
Yeah, just going back to that, lines 5, 6, and 7 are worrying.
Yes, those are very
And they all assume a healthy economy.
They all assume a healthy economy, right? Exactly. Yeah. So if those don't happen, we're looking at much smaller budget percentage increases than what you see on line 2. Yeah. And we've had budget increases for the past 3 years, 6%, 8%, and this year 5%. So, and that's just to keep what we've had. We as CFAC included in your report last year, you recognize the fact that we need to attract and maintain a qualified workforce. So what did we do? We had new labor contracts the past couple of years, and we've increased health insurance benefits from 50% to 70%, because that was the single largest complaint that we were receiving from applicants and from people leaving the organizations, that we don't pay enough and we don't pay enough for health insurance. Our salaries aren't competitive and we don't pay enough for health insurance. It's the cost of maintaining and attracting and maintaining a qualified workforce are those labor and benefit costs. So yeah, that resulted in some larger budget increases, but we can't sustain those types of percentage budget increases going forward. They're going to have to be much smaller than what we have been doing for the past 3 years. Particularly if we do have a downturn in the economy, it's going to become a situation where we're looking at reducing the number of positions that we have. And we've been through this before. The economy goes in cycles, as you all know. It's been a long time. Really, it's overdue. From the last recession that we had, that last recession was often referred to as a Great Recession. Yeah, it's usually you see these things happening every 10 years. But we haven't had one real significant recession since that last one in 2008, 2009.
Oof.
Here's a history of the new property tax growth for the past 10 years. You can see we peaked at almost 1.8 million in FY24, and that was the year that most of Vineyard Wind's value came on the books for the town of Barnstable. FY25, another decent year, almost 1.7. The biggest single project in that new growth was the Wilkins facility out off of Addicks Lane. That's the kind of development from a financing perspective. That's the kind of growth that you need in property. I'm not saying that's the type of development, but that's the financial equivalent of the development that you need to maintain or to try to get $2 million of new property tax growth every year.
When is the Wilkins 2 tax revenue expected to come on?
It all depends on how quickly they construct that. So if they break ground sometime in FY26, it's probably going to be 2 to 3 years after they break ground before most of that comes on.
Okay. And that
Wilkins 1 came on in 25. I think they broke ground on that in 22.
so probably about 3 years from when they broke ground. Yeah. Is that accounted for in your targeted numbers there, that additional tax revenue?
Not specifically. Again, those are targets.
Right.
Yeah. So I mean, that's what we need. If we need $2 million of growth in terms of tax dollars, that's over $300 million in property development. Now, Wilkins 1, I think, is on our books for about 66 million. Wilkins 2 is going to be bigger.
Right.
So that probably will end up being closer to 80 million when it's all said and done. So, it's a third.
It's a big chunk, yeah.
A big chunk, but it's, you need more. And so,
right.
I think that's a lofty target. All of those revenue targets are lofty targets, but it's just to illustrate that's what you need in order to fund.
And that's when the occupancy permit is granted. That's when it comes on the tax rolls.
No, it comes on gradually because we've adopted a section of law that allows the community to pick up new growth as it occurs as of June 30th every year. So if they're 50% complete, we'll pick up 50% of the estimated value at that point in time in year one, and then if year two comes, if they're at 80% completion, we'll get another 30%.
Okay.
And that's kind of what happened with Vineyard Wind and Wilkins 1 is it came on over a couple of years. Each one, a big chunk comes on mostly when they once they break ground and it starts going up.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean they're optimistic or they're high targets to achieve in order to fund budget increases that high. And so, we have a few questions here. What do we do? So how do we maximize our new property growth revenue to reduce reliance on reserves to balance the budget? Or should we try to encourage redevelopment of underutilized parcels, blighted parcels? We don't have a lot of empty, undeveloped land anymore. Those days are gone. So it's really revitalizing underutilized properties that could contribute towards growing our tax base. But that has, could have a lot of negative connotations associated with it too, as we've seen recently. in some of our town council meetings, that a lot of the development that gets proposed and brought forward on underutilized properties becomes very controversial. And so, it's a balancing act. And so, again, that's probably going to, make that target for new growth very challenging to achieve. Should we start thinking about taking some of our general fund resources and redirecting more to the capital budget or the operating budget? I mean, we put aside a certain percentage of our general fund resources every year for the capital program. Maybe we should reduce that funding towards the capital side of the budget and direct more to the operating side to provide some relief to the operations side of the budget. We've been pushing so much more money to the capital side of the budget for years that our operations sides have struggled. And then if the Municipal Empowerment Act is approved, should we implement those changes that are allowed under that Empowerment Act, under that act, and direct that revenue to the operations or the capital side of the budget? And should an operating budget override question be considered to maintain our current service levels and reduce our reliance on reserves to balance the operating budget? So those are some policy questions that we're looking for some direction on from the town council that we presented to them. Moving into the
ask a question. This
Yes.
is Frank, Mark.
Frank.
Is there even a bullet on ways to do things less expensive and ways to reduce costs? Is it ever considered, or does it always grow our way out?
Yeah, absolutely. It's and that's really where, one of the if we don't like any of these options, that's what we do. But that means cuts to services, and those services become, whatever those reductions are, controversial, because when you look at the operating budget, where's the money? It's in education, it's in police, and it's in DPW. And so if you're going to try to reduce your way out of this problem in terms of budget cuts, those operations which provide essential services to any community are the ones that end up absorbing most of the reductions. And oftentimes the reductions are controversial and you get pushback. And so, but that is certainly an option.
Well, that's why I think it's so important that we said it didn't happen in the last year, but maybe in the future year, to really see, because you say the drivers are labor, health, and pension, to actually see those costs together, because they're broken apart. So I think the typical taxpayer has no idea how expensive it is when you hire someone for the most menial job and you factor in the pension costs for 40 years after they retire, that true cost is multiples of what people think they're earning.
Yeah. So
outsourcing may be a solution in some areas.
Yeah, and those percentage increases that I showed you a couple of slides ago, those will require reductions in the number of personnel that we have in order to achieve those targeted percentages. And even though there are percentage increases in the budget, we don't have enough resources to fund a level service would require more than 3.5% a year. Level services require 5% or more on an annual basis.
So it's another question where it said that the town made the decision to pay health insurance from 50% to 70%. Was that negotiated by the same people that got another 20% of the health insurance paid? How did that take place?
That was at the direction of the town council. We brought forward, the town council, we had a workshop with them. We presented to them what it would be. We had, we went through the whole process of the stress that we had so many unfilled positions. Weren't able to hire applicants or maintain a good quality workforce. It was presented to the town council. They authorized the town manager to go forward and negotiate a change. So
did it reduce the stress on hiring? Was it successful?
Still too early, but yes, I think we've been maintaining people. Hiring in the police department involves even more complication. because of the civil service system that we're currently under, which the council voted to get us out of. And so we're working to get that out, but that's also a contributing factor.
Thank you. I didn't want to go down a rat hole, but I wasn't around for that last budget review.
Sure. Let's move into the capital program. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we set aside a portion of our general fund resources every year for the capital side of the budget. Right now, it's about 8% of the overall general fund budget of $17.2 million. It's a combination of debt service and pay-as-you-go financing, so that we're not borrowing all the funding for all projects. We try to pay for some of those projects out of cash reserves. It's about 4% each. That 8% that we allocate to made up about 4%, debt service financed and cash financed. The rule of thumb is to keep your debt service at or less than 10% of your operating budget, and your total capital commitment somewhere in the range of 7 to 12%. It's not an industry recommendation; it's just a rule of thumb. And this should allow you to maintain some flexibility in your operating budgets while still investing adequately in your infrastructure. Of course, the CWMP places significant upwards pressure on that. And the Capital Trust Fund right now, our projections show that we can finance about $15 million of new debt for the next 5 years, so about $75 million. But the asks are much more than that. So again, the policy question here is, should some of those larger capital projects be financed with debt exclusions? And that includes CWMP, new school buildings, these big dollar projects. That perhaps they should be financed on a debt exclusion, like the community authorized one for the town of Barnstable share of the new Cape Cod Regional Technical High School. That was the last one that the town authorized. And so, that's the question. Should we look at some of those larger projects and maybe fund them that way? Of course, that would require a referendum with voter approval to do so. So drilling down into the capital program a little bit further to the one specific project, which is the CWMP, we currently commit $5 million a year out of the general fund from our property taxes to that program. Our plan is to increase that by another $750,000 this year for FY27. That level of funding, as well as the other resources for funding the CWMP, has provided us the resources necessary to fund all projects that have been approved through the FY26 capital program. So everything prior to that, and then what we just approved for the FY26 program, it brings us to over $300 million in projects, a substantial sum. The FY27 planned projects, as that model that you mentioned earlier this evening, some of you mentioned, looking at putting the numbers in that model illustrates that with this level of commitment, we can continue to go forward using those levels of commitments plus the other assumptions in that model with the FY27 projects, in addition to what's already been approved. But FY28 and beyond is going to require additional resources. We won't be able to do any more projects beyond that until we find more resources. So the policy question here is, what mechanism do we utilize going forward to continue the planned implementation of the CWMP? One being a debt exclusion override. We've talked about this many times before, that perhaps we should pursue a debt exclusion override for the comprehensive wastewater management plan. We could create we've talked about this as well, a municipal water infrastructure investment fund. It works similar to the Community Preservation Act, where it's a voter approved surcharge on a property tax bill of up to 3%, just like the Community Preservation Act. That goes into a water infrastructure investment fund, and you can use it to fund water and sewer projects. Could do something like that. We could redirect more general fund operating budget resources to CWMP. We could reduce the operating budgets and cut back on services and redirect that money to the CWMP. We could revisit that conversation about systems development charges that came up when we were reviewing the Wilkins 2 project, if you recall. When we implemented the financing plan for the CWMP, at that time, the council didn't want to pursue a system development charge. They felt it was piling on. But that topic came up again when you have a big project like a Wilkins that's not paying into the system for its development, that then maybe we should hit them with the systems development charge. But if we implement one, it's got to be uniformly applied to all new sewer users, including residential. So we can't just pick and choose who to charge a system development charge to. We could assess more on user rates. We could raise more revenue through, larger increases in our sewer utility rates and use that money to help build out the infrastructure. And one of the other things we can look at is the Municipal Empowerment Act. Still waiting for approval on this. You may have read recently that the state has taken this up again. It's in committee. A couple of committees are reviewing it, and then it's still got to go to a third committee for review before it gets approved. So hopefully sometime this fiscal year, we'll hear about whether or not the state decides to pass that. And finally, some tax levy options. We present these every year to the town council. Again, these are fiscal policy related. These are ones that council acts on every single year and will continue to act on by vote as required by law. Whether or not to adopt a split tax rate and a residential exemption. Both of these options don't change the amount of money we can raise through the tax levy. It just changes who pays how much between classes of property. And in terms of the residential exemption, it's within the residential class who pays more or less. So there's little benefit to a residential taxpayer if we were to adopt a split tax rate, because we're 90% residential and only 10% commercial, industrial, and personal property. So if we were to split the rate, there's like a 1-to-9 ratio of benefit to cost. Very small benefit to the residential taxpayer, but a significant increase in a commercial property taxpayer's tax bill. And many of our commercial properties are small businesses. The residential exemption, we can go as high as 35%. We're currently at 25%. That tool provides relief to primary homeowners who call Barnstable, most primary homeowners anyways, who call Barnstable their home. They file their income taxes from that location. That, as you know, that tool shifts more of the residential tax levy that class has to pay from primary homeowners to secondary homeowners and rental properties, places like Wilkins and other large apartment complexes and smaller ones too. We could go as high as 50% if we're designated as a seasonal community. We haven't received the designation yet. I believe sometime by the end of this calendar year, we're supposed to get some guidance issued from the state as to what communities need to do to qualify as a seasonal designation for a seasonal community.
What's held it up so far, Mark?
I think there's a committee at the state level that's developing the criteria to make yourself that you have to follow to qualify as a seasonal community. That wasn't developed when they created the law or created the designation. They automatically designated Nantucket, I think all the communities of Martha's Vineyard, and then like a handful on Cape Cod, but not every community on Cape Cod. And so they're developing the criteria that we need to meet in order to qualify.
What would be an example of the criteria?
Probably, the biggest one being the amount of housing stock that a community has that is seasonal compared to year round.
And what's our percent?
Well, if you're just looking at the residential exemption, we're close to 50-50. We have about half of our residential property owners file for and get the residential exemption.
And on Nantucket and the Vineyard, it's considerably lower, I assume.
Yeah, I think, considerably lower. That's why, they're, I don't know what their percentages are, but yeah, I think that's why they automatically designated them as seasonal communities. And I think 2 or 3 towns automatically got that designation from them. And I don't know what they use to make that designation for those towns. But we did
Depends
not
how
get
bad the state senator wants it, I guess.
Yeah, there you go.
Represents those towns.
Yeah, it's mostly those outer Cape towns, right? I think there's
Yep.
a couple out
I
there.
believe so, yeah.
Chatham was one, and Provincetown another. So yeah, our current exemption rate is 25%. We could go as high as 35% currently. So the policy question here is, should any increase in the residential exemption be tied to a tax levy increase ballot question to help minimize or eliminate any impact on the median value property owner in town? So I've illustrated this before to the town council that if the voters were to approve a debt exclusion for X number of dollars, you could completely mitigate the impact on the property tax bill by increasing the residential exemption by a small percentage from 25 to say 26, 27, 28, 29 gradually over a number of years as that debt service came on our books. And I'm going to illustrate it again to see if that's something that they would consider doing. But again, neither of these options impact the amount of taxes that we can generate. It just decides who pays what. So.
Mark, to that point, when you say you're going to give them that presentation again, I don't mean this in a demeaning way towards our town councilors, but I'm not certain they understand it in the level of detail that you might want them to, and that maybe one way that we could accomplish that between you and us as a committee is your presentation here is tremendous, but and there's a lot of information in there, but I'm a big fan of presenting numbers in millions when the majority of them are millions, and then it gives you so much more room on the page where you could give some history so people can see trends, because with those trends, some of these numbers become pretty clear. I mean, I think it's a good thing, but these numbers are extremely conservative in many cases. And if you showed 3 or 4 years of history and then the future, I think some of the town councilors could be more at ease on whether or not they have to grow their way out of everything. That the numbers, you're consistently, the revenues come in extremely strong, the expenses come in way under, but that's not clear. It doesn't jump off the page unless you can see trends. So I think, I don't want you to change your conservative ways, but please don't get me wrong, but it would be nice. I think town councilors could sleep better at night realizing that a lot of these numbers are pretty conservative. And if they were in millions and they were trends, I think they would digest them in a more complete manner. Just my thoughts, but
Okay, thank you.
Mark, I have a question. When you, in your policy question, tying an increase in the residential exemption to a tax levy increase ballot question, for example, a debt exclusion or some similar end run around Prop 2.5. That's what you refer to when you say tax levy increase ballot question. Is that
Yes.
right?
Yeah. So again,
Yeah.
Say we were to go to the voters with a debt exclusion override,
Right.
to help finance the comprehensive wastewater management plan.
Right.
And that would, the annual debt service on those projects is $10 million a year.
Right.
And we would add $10 million to the tax levy for the life of the loan for those projects. You could mitigate the impact on the tax bill by increasing the residential exemption for qualifying property owners so that there's no increase in their tax bill due to that debt exclusion.
Yeah.
So what you end up doing is you shift you shift most of that debt exclusion to second homeowners.
Right. So you remember 2 years ago when the council, they actually raised the debt exclusion, the residential exemption to 25%. But you may recall that I spoke during public comment at that meeting, and I advocated higher, 30 or 35%. But what Craig Tamish, who wasn't president at the time, he said expressly, while he agreed with my analysis, he thought that the council should hold a little bit of potential increase in reserve for exactly this event, a debt
Yeah, because
exclusion
we had
override.
presented this to them
Yeah.
previous to that
Yeah.
increase taking place. And we said, this is a tool you could use that allows you to provide some relief to your primary homeowners who call Cape Cod their home and theoretically, shift it to the people who can afford it. People
Right.
with second, third, fourth homes, and one of them's on Cape Cod. The thinking is that these people can afford more taxes than your people who live in the town of Barnstable. But that's the reason why they invented the residential exemption. At the state level, that's the tool they gave communities. And every time we try to fight for more Chapter 78, by changing the Chapter 78 funding formula, the state's response to us is that Barnstable, we look at your tax rate. You're getting one of the lowest tax rates in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Go to your voters for a property tax levy increase to fund your schools. Don't come to us.
Right.
We do have one of the lowest tax rates in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
Well, it's it's just interesting that Craig was thinking ahead, because I think he and most of the other town council members, if you got them to admit, to be open about it, they would say that they anticipate the need for a debt exclusion override in the near future, over the next several calendar years, for the schools or for CWMP or both. So,
But Mark is so correct here, though, that it's unbelievable that we need to help him find a way to communicate this so people are all nodding in agreement that what he's recommending, or what maybe he can't officially recommend, but what he's mapping out is a great roadmap as to what the future should be.
yeah,
It is, I would wait until the Municipal Empowerment Act, because being able to go to 50%, you probably have one shot to go for an override. And
yeah.
if we can go from 25 to 50%, you can essentially hold harmless most homeowners.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, as Mark just said, you wouldn't have to go to 50%. Maybe you could even go to 35%, which is the current limit. Then there's several towns on the Cape who are at 35% now, Provincetown being one of them.
Yeah, unfortunately, the idea didn't get any traction with the previous council.
Right.
And I think it's let's say ballot referendums are tough.
Yeah. And our
People
history
feel that they're getting
in getting them
something.
through isn't that good, except
And
for the tech school.
except and that's those are the ones that are successful. They're for a specific project. Those have a chance to be more successful than if it's just a general operating override. But our CWMP, really needs to be framed as a water quality issue where all property owners benefit from cleaner drinking water, cleaner coastal estuaries, cleaner lakes and ponds, preservation of property values. If we don't do this thing, all of that is going to deteriorate. It's not to speak of the Conservation Law Foundation's lawsuits that we already are facing, and we'll face more, or court ordered action if we don't effectively implement the CWMP eventually. That's a possibility, but yeah, it's a strategy to help, fund this thing by protecting our primary residents who have lived on the Cape for years and call that place home. So, well, we'll see. We'll see where it goes.
Well, thank you. I agree with Frank. it's an excellent presentation.
Agreed.
Yes, we
That's all
appreciate
I have.
that. So, and any other comments on that before we move on? No. Okay, so the last,
Just, Chris,
oh,
I'm gonna need to leave like 5 minutes, just.
okay, well, we'll just briefly discuss this next item on the preparation of annual reports for fiscal 23 and 24, which I know, Lillian, you had taken that upon yourself, correct?
Yes.
So are those ready for submission, Mark, or?
You have them in front of you, I believe. They were sent to everybody.
Yeah, no, we all received them.
Yes.
I don't, do you see anything that needs to be changed, I guess, or, Mark, from your perspective?
No, I think they're spot on with what the committee worked on those 2 years. I appreciate Lillian taking the initiative to prepare those. And I will, if the committee is fine with that, I will submit those to the town manager's office. You weren't remiss in doing anything here. You were just never requested to prepare those reports for FY23 or 24. None of us were. No department, no board or committee. We stopped producing an annual report after the FY22 because we don't need to do one. It's a nice to have, but counselors have asked for the town to produce those reports, and so we're going to go back to producing these on an annual basis. So that's why we asked you for those, and thank you, Lillian, for sending those forward.
Yeah, I
Nice
thought
job.
that was great, Lillian.
Yes, thank you. So
No,
nothing else is needed. That's all that you need for that, Mark? Yeah.
That's all I
Well,
need.
I
can
would
submit those
move,
tomorrow.
should we take a motion to approve the annual reports?
Sure.
I move that we approve the annual reports for fiscal 23 and 2024.
Second,
There's
Second,
moved and seconded. Can you call the roll, Jeremy?
certainly Hector Gunther,
Yes,
Tom Keen,
yes,
Chris Lozon,
Yes.
Jim Sproul,
Looks like Jim is Jim's on mute.
Jim is still awake. I can see him. He's giving me a
Yes,
thumbs
my
up.
apology.
Frank Ward,
Not being involved in those years, I think I should abstain on that vote.
Okay.
Lillian Wu,
Yes.
and I am a yes.
All right, perfect. So any correspondence from anyone on the committee? Hearing none. Any other communications from you, Mark?
Yeah, I just wanted to, hopefully you've all, I don't expect you have read this yet, but the MMA just put out that report of a study that they did on financing municipal government. And so I just wanted to share that all with you. It kind of basically tells us everything that we already know, that, as far as revenue goes, if it doesn't provide the revenue growth many communities need in order to sustain the cost of services because of inflation and other factors. So
Yeah.
It's an excellent report.
Yeah, I appreciate you sending that to us. So
you're welcome.
there's no other business. I guess we can take a motion to adjourn.
I move.
So moved.
Moved
Second.
and seconded. Can we take the roll?
Hector Gunther,
Yes.
Tom Keen,
Yes.
Chris Lozon,
Yes.
Jim Sproul,
Yes.
Frank Ward,
Yes.
Lillian Wu,
Yes.
and I am a yes.
Excellent.
Thanks
Thank you,
all.
everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
Good night.
everyone.
Good night.